and welcome to a Bookish Friday video. So today's video is going to be my May wrap up. So let's, as always, start off with the statistics, which I have in my handy reading journal. So in May I read a total of 18 books, and the star ratings of those were no 1 stars, 3 2 stars, 5 3 stars, 6 4 stars, and 4 5 stars. So what I like to see, lots of 4s and 5 stars, which means it's been a really good reading month. My total page count was 5,179 pages, and the audio hours of audiobooks that I listened to were 31 hours and 36 minutes. Looking at the genres, I read 1 thriller. Yes, I did. I read a thriller. I read 1 contemporary. I read 1 classic. I read no mangas or graphic novels. I read 8 middle grades, and that might have something to do with the Believathon, which I took part in May. I read no non-fiction, and I read 7 science fiction fantasies. So, sci-fi or fantasies, should I say. Let's face it, they were fantasies. The origin of the books that I read, 4 of those were borrowed, probably the audiobooks, because all libraries are still closed at the moment, and 14 of those were books that I owned personally and were on my TBR shelves. The formats of the books that I read 1 ebook. I finally used like my Kindle Unlimited subscription. I read 3 audiobooks, and I read 14 physical books. For the authors, I read from 3 male authors and from 15 female authors. And the bindings of the physical books that I read, 3 of those were hardback and 11 of those were paperbacks. As I say, I did take part in the Believathon this year, so let me go through those books for you now. So the first book I read was for the Poacher's Pocket Inn, which was to read the first book in a series, and for that I buddy read with Charlotte the first book in the Magisterium series, The Iron Trials. This is a collaboration between Holly Black and Cassandra Clare. I absolutely loved this story. This was a reread for me, and same as before, it was a 5-star. I love how this takes the Chosen One trope and turns it completely on its head. You think you know the story that you're reading, and then Holly Black and Cassandra Clare go, no, we're going to change it up. We're going to change it up, make it different, and I loved it. So yes, I read that one. The second book I read, which was for the prompt Baba Yaga's house, to read a book featuring a female relationship, I picked The Girl of Ink and Stars by Kieran Millwood Hargrave. I love this story as well. This was so good. I really enjoyed this one. Now, I thought that this was about a young girl who leaves her island, which is forbidden, and she goes off to find her father. I was completely wrong. Basically, something happens and her best friend goes running off into the unknown part of the island that they live on. And so the main character is called Issa, and she decides to go off and try and find her friend. And there's some strange creatures on this unknown part of the island and some strange people. It's a whole adventure, and it was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. This is Kieran Millwood Hargrave's debut, I believe, and I have read many of her books, well, a couple of her books previously, and I always felt like the endings were a bit rushed. Not with this one. The ending of this was brilliant. I really loved it. and I gave this one a 4 stars. So yeah. So for the next prompt, it was Mermaids Lagoon, which was featuring a female Bond, and for that one I read Tilly and the Book Wanderers from the Pages & Co series by Anna James. This was a beautiful story about a young girl who lives with her grandparents in a bookshop, and she discovers that she can travel and talk to characters in books and travel through books, and it's a magic that her family seem to have. And there is a really weird, creepy bad guy in here, which I really liked as well. It was very atmospheric. And yeah, really enjoyed this one. And I gave this one a 3 stars. The next prompt I read was Orion Found, and this was to read a sci-fi or a book related to space. And for that I read Orion Lost by Alistair Chisholm. And this was a 5 stars. I absolutely love this book. I read this mid of the month, around a very poor mental health time for me. I was buddy reading it with a friend that I've made through Twitter, and she also goes to the Waterstones book club when that's on. And this book has a wonderful message in it, and I love books like that. That's why I like middle grade books. And this one, the overall message of it is, you are the master of your own ship. You cannot change the waters, you cannot change the wind. All you can do is control your own ship. You are in charge of that, and that's the only thing that you can really keep control of and change. You can't change the outside elements. And I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that I need to change, like, not to change myself, but I need to only be concerned with what I can do and not be worrying about everything else that's around me. And I needed that at the time that I read it, and needless to say, it was a 5 stars. Needless to say, it was my favourite book of the month, and I'm also actually going to get a tattoo with the message of Orion Lost. I am going to get a tattoo saying I am the master of my own ship, because I need that. I need to remember that throughout my life. So people, I don't read sci-fi. Sci-fi bores the crap out of me. I remember being forced to watch Star Trek when I was a kid, and I hated it. So anything to do with space and aliens, and I was so worried about picking this up, but I thought I would give it a go, and it has really meant so much to me. Like, this book is important and so special, and I actually took part in the, well, I watched the live show with Gavin and Jade, who had this book as their middle grade book of the month, and Alistair Chisholm was actually in the chat, and I happened to mention how much this book meant to me and that message of being the master of your own ship, and that I intended to get a tattoo of that. And Alistair Chisholm actually replied to me saying, that is so lovely to hear that my book has meant that much to you. And I was just like, oh my god. I was in tears. So yes, love this book. If you love a sci-fi, if you even think that you don't love sci-fi, pick up this book. Please pick up this book. It has such a lovely message, and yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. 5 stars. And the final book that I read for the Believathon was for the Bookkeeper's Stronghold, and that was to read the second book in the series. So I picked up the second book in the series of the Magisterium, which is the Copper Gauntlet, again by Holly Black and Cassandra Clare. Again, I buddy read it with Charlotte, and yeah, it was just as good. I really enjoyed it. I did give this one a 4 stars, so it didn't quite live up to the 5 stars of the first book, but I think that was because the beginning of this was a bit slow. There was a couple of things in it that were a bit repetitive. Just ask Charlotte, she got really peeved with the repetitiveness of a couple of things in this book. But yeah, I'm reading the third book in June, so yeah, I love this series. I think it's brilliant. I really liked where this story is going. So yeah, that was the final book that I read for the Believathon, and it was a 4 stars. So going on to all of the other books that I read for the rest of the month. So let me talk to you firstly about some of the audiobooks that I read for this month. So the first one, I'm just going to get it over and done with pretty quick because I'm DNFing this series, and I was thinking about DNFing it, and I was thinking, no, I really should keep going with it. But then with recent events, I thought, you know what, why am I bothering? I read Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix by She Who Shall Not Be Named. You know who wrote it. So I listened to the audiobook, and look, I gave it a 3 stars. I don't enjoy Harry Potter. It's not a childhood favourite of mine. I never read it when I was a kid. I started reading Harry Potter last year. That's the first time I picked up a Harry Potter book. So I have been trying to get through the series just to say, yes, I've read Harry Potter. No. So yeah, I read that. I won't read it anymore. I'm DNFing the series. A, because she's not a very nice person. B, because I've not really been enjoying the books. And C, because there are so many things wrong with those books. I don't know. So that was that. The next audiobook that I read was called The Merman by Dick King-Smith. Do you remember him? I read a lot of Dick King-Smith when I was younger. I couldn't name any of them. I know there's one that's quite famous and I can't remember what it is. But yeah, this was a cute little children's story about a young girl who is on holiday at the beach, and she befriends a merman. And he teaches her how to swim so that she's not so scared of the water anymore. And it was really sweet. It was only an hour and 33 minutes long, so on like 1.5 times speed, which is how I listened to it. It was very short, and I gave it a 2 stars. It wasn't great, it wasn't wonderful, it was cute. Maybe thinking on it, I should give it a 3 because it was okay, but it's not something that I'm going to remember all time. But yeah, so that was that one. And the other audiobook that I listened to, I don't know why I never read this when I was a child, or why I never read it to my children when they were young, but I finally got round to reading The Velveteen Rabbit by Marjorie Williams. It was only a 26-minute audiobook. I think I was trying to fill in some time between books. And it broke my heart, people. I can see why so many people love The Velveteen Rabbit. It was just so adorable and sweet and so heartbreaking. I really want to buy myself a copy. I do, because that was just such a beautiful book. And why wasn't it read to me as a kid? Or why didn't I read it to I don't understand. I gave it 4 stars. It was beautiful. I really loved it. I think If I have a physical copy and it's got beautiful illustrations in, that could push it up to a 5 stars for me. But because I listened to it on audiobook, I didn't have any visual like illustrations or anything to look at. So yeah, I think if I was to buy a copy of The Velveteen Rabbit, I would love a beautifully illustrated version. I think that would really bump that book up to a 5 stars for me, because oh, it's adorable. It was so sweet. Okay, and the ebook that I read for this month was an ebook called Dark Unicorn, and that was written by Taylor Hayden and Angela Kulig. I gave this a 2 stars, and the reason why is because it was almost like somebody was outlining a story. You know how when you're thinking of writing a story, you write down the basics of it, like when you're planning it out. And that's how it read. That's how I felt like it read. There was no detail in there. There was no explanation of world building or of characters. There was no description of who they were or why they were or anything like that. It was very much a basic kind of outline of a story. It had great potential. I want to say it had great potential for a great story. I mean, it was really interesting in the fact that the dark unicorn was actually a man, which yeah, I thought that too. And he's trapped in the form of a man, and yeah, it was an interesting story. It just wasn't flushed out enough, you know. I think it was a very basic ebook. So yes, that was a 2 star for me. So let's move on to some other books. Okay, so I read this one. This is Private Royals, which is a James Patterson book shots with Rhys Jones. This was just a very thin, small James Patterson's sort of thriller, and this was a story about a young girl who is, I think she's the daughter of a duke, has been kidnapped, and the he's like an inspector, private like detective, and called Jack, and he's called in to try and find the daughter without upsetting like the news and everything, because this is all amidst the trooping of the colour parade for the Queen's 90th birthday. So they have to find the Duke's daughter on the hush hush, because they don't want to be upsetting the news coverage of the trooping of the colour, and things aren't always as they seem, and it was really good. It was very, very interesting. I did only give it a 2 star though. Again, I think that the problem is it had potential, but because it's only a bookshop, it didn't have enough build up to it. I just didn't feel like it doesn't have the time to grab me and have me on the edge of my seat. So I felt like it had potential. It just didn't live up to it because it didn't have the word count. But I think that's kind of what these are. They're kind of like a feel out factor for the story. But yeah, I mean, if somebody took a similar story to this and really flushed it out into a 300, maybe 400 page book, I'd be much more interested in it and probably give it a higher rating. But yeah, it was just a 2 star for me. Another book I read this month was Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. This is the first book in the Infernal Devices. I liked this a lot more than I liked the Mortal Instruments series, but for whatever reason, these books put me in a slump. I can't help it. The problem with these books is I really enjoy myself as I'm reading them. Just I read them so slowly. Like, no other book makes me read as slow as these ones. like, this is a 482 page book, and this took me well over a week. I think this took me about 9 days to finish. I just, no other book takes me that long, apart from the Shadowhunters series books. I love this one. It was really interesting. I gave it 4 stars. We have new characters in here. We have a girl called Tessa Gray, who's just come over from America to England, into London, Victorian era, and during the reign of Queen Victoria. But she is instantly kidnapped and taken to a home where she is being forced to learn the fact that she is actually a shapeshifter, and she's been forced to shapeshift into different people by these 2 women, and she has to try and escape them, and when she does, she becomes involved in the Shadowhunters and their world. And yeah, it was very intriguing, and I really enjoyed this, as I say, far more than the Mortal Instruments, because the main characters in here did not annoy the crap out of me, like Clary and Jace from the Mortal Instruments series. But for whatever reason, these books just really slow down my reading, and I go slumpy, and I have to try and pick up another book that is really intriguing for me to try and keep up the momentum of reading, because no wonder it took me 13 months to read the 6 books of the Mortal Instruments, if this is how it makes me feel. I hoped that this one wasn't going to do that to me, but it did. So yeah, 4 stars. Please stop putting me in slumps. I don't like it. Finally, I read Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. Now this one is 536. This did not take me half as long as this one took me, and this one's shorter. So, you know, I flew through this. I think through 3 days, I think I read this one. So yeah, this is the 2nd book in the Six of Crows duology, which is a continuation of like the Grishaverse universe that Leigh Bardugo writes. And I really enjoyed this one. This was right at the beginning of May, so forgive me if I have to remind myself kind of what happened. I can't really say what happened in this one. A, because my memory is pants, and B, because spoilers. So that's my excuse. I do know that I did enjoy it, and I gave it 4 stars, so cannot wait to carry on. I am reading King of Scars in June, so can't wait to get to that one. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I do want to kind of, at some point in the future, just reread all the Grishaverse books, just because they're the kind of books that I feel like I could really delve into and enjoy over and over again. So yes, highly recommend. So that's that one. Oh, this next book. I was looking for an audiobook, although it's not down as one of the audiobooks that I read, because I have the physical copy. So if I have the physical copy of a book, no matter whether I read it physically or listen to it audibly, I always note it down as a physical book, not an audiobook, because I have the physical book, because it throws off my stats. But I read Jodi Picoult's My Sister's Keeper, and I listened to it on audio. As I say, I was trying to find an audiobook to fill my time. I was supposed to read this last year for my 19 books in 2019 challenge with Charlotte from Wacky World of Lottie, and it was one of the ones that I didn't get around to because I thought it was going to be too emotional for me and my personal life. Do you know what I mean? So this involves the story of a child being born specifically to donate bone marrow and blood and certain parts of her body for an already living sibling who is suffering with like a leukemia, I think it is. What the story is actually about is about this young girl who has been her sister's donor all her life, going to a lawyer and saying, I want to kind of stop my parents from forcing me to do this. And so she takes her parents to court to stop them from forcing her to keep going with these medical procedures. And it was so different to what I thought it was going to be, and I was actually sat downstairs on my laptop listening with my headphones on, and my husband was on his PS4 playing on the TV, and I got to the end and I was just sobbing my heart out. The ending is so sad and so, oh, it just hits you right here. And my husband was like, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" I was like, "Yes, I'm fine." I loved it. I gave it 5 stars, and this was going to be my book of the month until I read Orion Lost, and because that one just hit me in the feels so much more personally. This one was just a beautiful story, and yeah, I loved it. I wish I could find a better copy. This one's old and yellowed, but yeah, I love this one. I love this story so much. 5 stars, beautiful story. But if you are going to pick it up, know that it is going to break your heart at the end. Okay, so the next book I'm going to talk about that I read this month was Stargazer by Claudia Gray. This is the second book in the Evernight series. I won't tell you about what happens in this book because it is spoilers, but in the first book, Evernight, we have a school where this young girl is starting to attend. Her parents are teachers there, and it's kind of like a boarding school out in the middle of the sticks. But think Twilight twisted. So instead of the school being for humans and a couple of vampires attend, it's actually a school for vampires where a couple of humans attend. So yes, very interesting, very different take on a vampire story. I really like this one, and I do intend to carry on with the third book. Again, I'm reading that this month in June, so yeah, I'm carrying on with all my series in the month of June. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one and I gave it a 3 stars. The next one is again another series, and this is Silence, which is book 3 by Becca Fitzpatrick in the Hush Hush series. I am buddy reading this with Charlotte from Wacky World of Lottie. We are on to the final book. In fact, we've just finished it, so yeah, look out for the review of that at the end of June, or beginning of July, should I say. But yeah, Silence, third book. It's all about fallen angels and the Nephilim. In the Hush Hush books, you find that the fallen angels get the Nephilims to swear fealty to them, so that during Cheshvan, which is at a certain time at the year, fallen angels can possess the bodies of Nephilim in order to be able to experience the human world more fully and emotionally and physically. Yeah, we have our main character Nora, who is caught up in this world. This one I gave a 3 stars, so yes. The next book I'm going to talk about that I read in May is The Borrowers by Mary Norton. And this is such a short little story. It was such a cute little story about these tiny little people who live under your floorboards in the house, and they go out and they kind of like pinch things out of your house to make furniture in their little homes sort of area, and they try not to be seen by humans, and they have stories of their grandparents or their aunts, or of their relatives who have been seen by humans, and things have gone disastrously wrong for them, or they've been eaten by the cat. The family that we are following of the borrowers suddenly find themselves friendly with the boy living in the house, the human boy, and he starts helping them to find furniture for their house, and he ends up literally stealing things from the house in order to give to the borrowers. But then, yeah, things happen, and yeah, it's just a cute little story. That is a great children's story, classic children's story. So I gave this a 3 stars. I really enjoyed it. Now, I didn't realise that there are a couple of people reading this book throughout the month of May, because there is going to be, I think there was going to be, this was the book chosen for the Read Rate Review book club, which is hosted by G from Book Roast channel. I didn't know that this was the book chosen, but I happened to pick it up as well. This is an ARC copy of The City of Brass. So this is the story of a young woman, and I can't for the life of me remember her name. Nari, that's her name. A young woman called Nari. She's kind of like a bit of a scam artist at the beginning of the story, and she can heal people. She has the magic to heal people, and she accidentally summons a djinn, which is like a mythical person who has like genie kind of powers, and he says that she must be a long lost relative of a really famous family of healers, and he has to take her to the land of, or the city of Davabad. And so they have to journey towards Davabad, and she has to discover who she is and the past of her family. Also in Davabad, we also meet a character called Ali. He is a djinn. Yeah, Ali. And he is a djinn. He's a royal djinn, and he is part of the ruling family of Davabad. But things are not quite the way he wants them to be. There's a bit of a rebellion going on in Davabad, and he's trying to help the rebels, but then things happen, and there's a lot going on in this story. To be honest, it's like there's so many different parts to the story, each different storyline, and then they eventually kind of converged when Nari and her djinn friends that she accidentally summoned arrive in Davabad. They then meet Ali, but it's a whole thing. I did really enjoy it. I know that the 3rd book has just been released this month in June. I did enjoy this, and I gave it a 4 stars. And that's why I wasn't too bothered about purchasing the special edition by Fairy Loots, because it wasn't a 5-star for me. If it had been a 5-star, I might have been tempted, but as it was only a 4-star, it was a really good book, and I would like to read the 2nd and the 3rd book eventually, but I'm not going to rush out and pay the extortionate price that Fairy Loot were going to charge, because it was £74 for all 3 books plus postage and packaging, and I just, special edition or not, I'm not paying £25 a book. I'm just not. No. So yes, I did read that. It was 4 stars, very interesting. And the final book that I'm going to talk about that I read in May, and I buddy read this with Charlotte because I just wanted to know what she'd think of it as well. I read this, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is a prequel to her Hunger Games series, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was 5 stars for me. Brilliant. I was so intrigued with this book. This was the book that I picked up alongside Clockwork Angel because I needed something good to be reading while I was reading Clockwork Angel, putting me in a slump. And yeah, I loved it. So here we are following Coriolanus Snow. Yes, I had to kind of Google how to pronounce Coriolanus because I could not, for the life of me. I was hoping that it was going to be shortened, but it wasn't shortened often enough in the book. But yeah, we are following Coriolanus Snow, who is obviously President Snow in the Hunger Games. We are following him as a young adult, so I think he's in his early 20s, I think, in this book, or late teens, and he is chosen as a mentor for the female tribune from District 12. I never ever wanted Coriolanus Snow to be good. He is a baddie through and through. He is evil. He is self-indulgent. He is all about promoting himself. And he was exactly that in this book. You can see that the female tribune, who is, oh, what was her name now? I tell you, my memory is absolutely pants. Lucy Gray. That was the name of the female tribune from District 12, Lucy Gray, and she loves to sing. And you could see that she was starting to melt him, that she was starting to get him to care about someone else other than himself, that part of him wanted to be good for her, but he just couldn't do it. He is self-important. He is self-promoting. From the very beginning of this book until the very end of this book, he doesn't sway from that. It's all about what makes him look good, what makes him progress, what makes him promoted. And Lucy Gray kind of tries to veer him in the right direction, but he is constantly pulling against that with his natural instincts. And I loved it. I loved that Suzanne Grey made that choice, that Coriolanus was always going to be the bad guy. I liked the fact that she didn't make him a good person, because I wouldn't have believed that. I wouldn't have believed the story if had written Coriolanus Snow as a good guy. I just wouldn't have believed it. And I love the fact that we got a story from the viewpoint of a capital citizen. I didn't want Mag's story or Phoenix O'Dare's story, because I feel like that would just be repetitive of what we got in the Hunger Games. It would just be another Tribune story about fighting in the Hunger Games. I wanted to see something. I always wanted to see something from the capital's citizens' point of view. Like, I always like to see both sides of a war. And we got that in this. We got a capital citizen, Coriolanus Snow, and the other mentors as well, because each tribune has its own mentor, and we got to see them as well, them as people, them as characters in here, and I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. There's some interesting choices that Suzanne Collins made for this book, and I think she made the exact right ones. When I saw the cover of this book online, I was like, I'm not too sure of that. But now that I've read the book, the cover suits the story. It is just, Suzanne Collins' writing is not flowery. It's not buttery and, full of eloquent descriptions and things like that. She gets right to the nitty-gritty, right to the point, and that's what this this cover does. This is the point, and I love Suzanne Collins. Like, I so want to reread the Hunger Games trilogy. I did say to Charlotte, should we read the Hunger Games trilogy first and then read this? Or should we read this because it is a prequel? Read this first and then move on to the Hunger Games. So we did decide to read this one first, but I am going to reread the Hunger Games, and I can't wait to get back into that world. I really, really enjoyed those books when I read them the first time. So yeah, 5 stars for The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I just thought the choices that Suzanne Collins made, perfect. The writing, perfect. The way that the story went, it was perfect. And I have seen on YouTube that some people have actually done, like, actually put music to some of the songs that that are in this book, and that was really nice to go and look at and listen to, and just bring this book to more to life as well, because there's some beautiful songs in here as well. But yeah, I loved it. So that is that. So that is all the books that I read in May. I hope you enjoyed this wrap up. If you did, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!